Welcome to rePROs Fight Back, a podcast on all things related to sexual and reproductive health rights and justice. Hi, rePROs. How's everybody doing? I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and my pronouns are she, her. So, y'all, this weekend marked 1 year since the Dobbs decision, and I could spend the intro focusing on the many terrible things that have happened since then, but I don't want to. We're going to talk about post Dobbs in the interview today, so let's keep it there, and let's do good news, because y'all, there has been some good news recently, and let's just revel in it for a little bit and then deal with the post Dobbs stuff in the interview. So first up, there has been a good little run for gender affirming care in court recently. Both the bans in Florida and in Arkansas were in court, and both were struck down. Y'all, that is amazing news. The Florida decision also was really just great and really took the state to task over its attack on gender affirming care. So such good news. I know it's still going to be a long fight for trans rights and these attacks on gender affirming care, but it was so great to see these two positive rulings happen in the last week or so. Next up, we had a good Supreme Court decision. So there was the case Brackeen versus Holland, which was challenging the Indian Child Welfare Act that we were really concerned about and was going to have some really wide-ranging repercussions for tribal sovereignty. Y'all, we got a good decision, like a 7-2 good decision. So wonderful to see a good decision come out of the Supreme Court and tribal sovereignty holding strong for now. There were maybe some cracks opened in the ruling of places where it could still be challenged, but this was a win, a solid win, and really great news for tribal sovereignty. So let's just hold on to the good news for now. And next up, I know, y'all, I told you there was good news. I was not lying. There are multiple pieces of good news. Last week, Julie Rickleman, former lawyer with the Center for Reproductive Rights, who had argued abortion in front of the Supreme Court, really wonderful lawyer. She's been on the podcast before, was finally confirmed to the First Circuit. Y'all, she has a lifetime appointment and will be writing opinions, including opinions on reproductive rights. I am so excited for Julie. This is such great news. It is really wonderful to see a champion of reproductive health rights and justice come on the court. So congratulations, Julie. We look forward to seeing your opinions for many, many years to come. And with that, I guess we'll turn to the bummer news, which is my interview. But Becca and I have a really good time talking about 1 year post Dobbs. And we talk about what is giving us hope. So don't think that it's going to be all a bummer. It's a great conversation. I talked to Becca Andrews with Reckon News all about 1 year post Dobbs. So with that, let's turn to my interview with Becca. Hi, Becca. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Jenny. Thanks for having me.
I am really excited to talk to you. I feel like it's been a while.
It's been a minute.
But maybe not that long ago. I don't know. Time.
October, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. It was right when your book came out.
October.
Wow. That also feels like it was just yesterday, but also forever ago.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the pandemic that messed up my perception of time, or if it's just all of the trauma with the pandemic and Dobbs and everything. All the things.
Yeah. I feel like when people tell me when things happened, it's always it feels like it was yesterday / 6 years ago. I don't know.
Got nothing.
I have no grasp of the fact that I've been doing the podcast for 5 years now.
That's wild.
What? That is wild. I don't know how that happened. I've been recording it longer at home than I did in the office. Like, also wild. Anywho, that is not what we were going to talk about today. I mean, we could
We
just talk
contain
about time.
multitudes, Jenny. We contain multitudes.
Okay. So when this comes out, the weekend would mark 1 year since the Dobbs decision, which again feels like it just happened, but also have been dealing with the fallout for forever.
Yeah.
What are we seeing?
It's so heavy thinking about how it's been a year and how, we're at this. It's almost weird to call it an anniversary because in my head, anniversaries have like really positive connotations, right? But like this is such a sobering demarcation of time, I think, because at this point, we are really starting to see the damage, and we're really starting to understand the severe harm that has been done by the Dobbs ruling. We're seeing the human cost of what has happened. I feel like every time I open Twitter or like look at the news, there's another story about a pregnant person who had to become septic before they got care, or a physician who is on trial for providing. It feels dystopian, but at the same time, it also feels normal in this really terrifying way.
Yeah, I have to say, how fast it became like normal is terrifying.
Yeah, and I wonder what it's like for people who are kind of outside the RJ sphere, because I think for those of us who follow this stuff really closely, we've been preparing for this moment for a long time, right? And like you and I have talked about so many times, I'm based in Tennessee, so I'm in the South. It's been post-Roe down here for a minute, but it is worse now than it ever was. And it's just, yeah, it's wild to be having these conversations with people where they're like, I'm pregnant and I'm not sure if I can live in this state while I go through my pregnancy, because what if something happens and I can't get the care I need? So maybe I move out of state. Like, it's just very strange to be having these conversations. And it also makes me think of the people who don't have the privilege to really consider that as an option. I think that something that kind of keeps me going is that, the abortion funds post Dobbs have been doing incredible work in the face of really extreme circumstances. And they've helped a lot of people who otherwise would not have been able to travel to get care, be able to get that care. But yeah, this year it's been hard. It's been a really, really hard year.
I'm just like thinking through again, like that normalization, like you would see like that, the first story or two about some pregnant person's life being put at risk because they weren't able to access care. And it was like everywhere, right? It was like blasted everywhere. Hearing these like first wave of stories of people who are impacted by not being able to get abortions. And then it slowly started to like shrink in. And like now I feel like I'm seeing it from like the usual repro people and not like in the broader sphere as much anymore of regular media. And maybe that's just because I follow the RJ people and like the repro reporters, but like I really feel like seeing the scope of reporting in like the mainstream media has fallen a bit. I'm sure we'll see a spike right now around the 1 year date, but that's so frustrating how it just quickly became kind of business as usual.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And for the past few weeks, I've been doing a series for my newsletter with Reckon News, where I talk to different leaders of abortion funds. And what everyone has told me is that, in June when the Dobbs decision came down, or even in May when the Dobbs decision leaked, there was this huge flood of support, right, that allowed the funds to kind of scale up and prepare for this moment. But as the sort of panic and crazy headlines faded from the mainstream, they've lost a lot of that support. It's really dwindled. However, the need has not dwindled. So, and I'm glad that we're talking about this too in the context of normalization, because that really is part of it. Like, the water slowly gets hotter and then it's boiling. And the thing about the frog, it's a dumb metaphor, but the point is, like, you do kind of get used to these circumstances. And I think for people who don't have this in front of them every single day, it's hard to remember that this is affecting people's lives and this is actually harming people every single day. I also think that we've seen a massive shift in the way that content is in the social media algorithm.
Oh, yeah.
So I know, yeah, you know exactly what I'm
But I
talking
think
about.
it's worth pointing out, because I think if you're not experiencing it, like, you might not see it.
Totally. I mean, I, as you know, like, I have been writing about repro for 7 or 8 years at this point. And listen, like, stories about abortion or reproductive justice, or the ways that all of that is being policed, they've never been top traffic earners at any place that I've ever worked. Like that, and people have written about that really beautifully. But now with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram's algorithms changing, my work has been buried to such a degree that I am getting very little interaction with readers. And that's really scary. And I think it's really exacerbating the problem, right? Of, if people don't know what's happening, if people can't see it, then it kind of fades from the milieu. It kind of fades from mind. So it's really frustrating as a reporter whose calling is to get information to people, that information is being buried and there's just nothing I can do about it. And I know that the funds are experiencing this too. If they post something that's like saying, we need support for this person, they're not getting interaction because they're getting buried by the algorithm.
I have to say, like, I'm absolutely saying the same thing too. Like, when I'm sharing episodes or things, like, people aren't seeing it, but, like, to, like, understand the scope of, like, what Becca is talking about, like, I interact with Becca when I see her things. I interact with, like, Jess and Imani at Rewire when I see their things. I do not
Queens.
see them anymore.
Yeah.
Very rarely do they show up. Like, at times I was like, are they just, like, did they leave Twitter? Like, are they gone? And then you would, like, go to their timeline and, like, there's, like, tons of things posted. Like, I am just not seeing people who are talking about our things anymore showing up, and, like, it's so frustrating
100%. I
and
think it was
harmful.
as completely, and it's been especially stark to me with Imani's work, because Imani is everywhere. I mean, she is just on top of it always. She's always tweeting.
And I
I'm
never see
always
her anymore.
reading her tweets. I'm always learning something new. And she's just like not in my feed anymore. And it's like, what, this is one of the leaders in the ways that we talk about this stuff. Like, if she's getting buried, then the conversation more broadly is being buried. And that's really disturbing.
And again, like, if people aren't seeing the information, like, then they don't know what is happening, and there's real harm happening in so many states to so many people.
And I think too, there's still so many people who don't really understand what the past year has meant and don't really understand what exactly has happened. So I talked to a lot of college students. I talked to a lot of young adults in my line of work, and some of them aren't aware that abortion isn't legal in the United States anymore. And the reasons for that are complicated, and there are a lot of them. But I think that also means that we in the media have some serious soul searching to do and some serious work to do in figuring out how to get information to people who aren't getting it.
It feels like one of those things of, like, you're living your life and you don't see the information until you need it, right?
Yes, 1,000%.
And that's a problem, right? If you're not paying attention to the space, because for any myriad of very valid reasons, but then all of a sudden you need it and then find out it doesn't exist in your state anymore. Like, that's an extra layer of like complication that you are having to then navigate, of like trying to figure out where you can go, or like all of a sudden then not understanding you can go somewhere else or access it online or any various things, which it just makes it that much harder.
I think the other thing that people maybe don't understand so much is the way that the Supreme Court and the way that the attack on abortion rights has really affected democracy more broadly. So we're seeing anti-choice Republicans really coming for all number of basic human rights. We're seeing this like backlash against trans healthcare. We're seeing this backlash against LGBTQ rights more broadly. And we're also seeing them going to more drastic measures to make sure that stuff happens. So here in Tennessee, and this was over gun rights, but it's not a coincidence that the 3 lawmakers that were ousted from the Tennessee House are also pro-choice lawmakers. That's an assault on democracy. That's an assault on the representation of the people. In Iowa, recently there was the Iowa Supreme Court hearing over the 6-week abortion ban. It was deadlocked, so abortion remains legal at 20 weeks in Iowa. But now there's this movement to try to take one of the justices that voted against the 6-week ban and get him off the bench. It's like we're in this place too where Republicans are like, okay, so now we have this great big victory that we've been planning for a generation, and let's see just how far we can take it. Let's see if we can completely reshape the face of democracy so that it's not a democracy anymore. So it's a little bit more fascist, and wonder what we could do then. It's really, really disturbing. If there's, I don't know, I don't want to like prioritize things over other things because everything is just kind of horrible. But that is the thing that is like really keeping me up at night, because the harm can get so much greater if we don't have the checks and balances of democracy to sort of keep the scales even.
Oh, that leads perfectly, because I was going to ask, like, what are you worried about right now? And I think the democracy part is like a huge thing right now that
that's what I'm worried about.
You're hearing about in specific spaces. And I think to a lot of people who aren't in those spaces, it can feel really disconnected and separate from this conversation. But, you hear it in the global space with like the spread of authoritarianism, and like you're seeing a lot of the anti-human rights stuff spreading in those spaces as well. And so you are seeing it in like targeted specific contexts, but in a broader conversation, I think a lot of people aren't as familiar with how these are interlinked.
Yeah, 100%. And I think another thing that's sort of exacerbating the limits of the conversation is that newsrooms are shrinking. We just saw a couple of weeks ago, I forget exactly what the number was, but it was just a record number of journalists have been laid off in the past year because we're losing our newsrooms where they're not funded. There's not enough money. People aren't able to support their news resources because everyone's pulled in a million different directions financially. And there are other reasons for that as well. There's also corporate greed, but I don't need to get into the whole thing here. But it is a problem when there are fewer journalists to report out the news, to investigate the injustices, to write the analytical pieces about like what it means to have an assault at this scale on our democracy. I mean, I don't understand how we're supposed to really fully reckon with those things if there's not if there aren't journalists to start that conversation.
And I think that feeds right back to the conversation we were having about like so many people not knowing what's happening, right? Like a big target of like losing journalists is like local newsrooms, state-based local reporting that is taking really hard hits. And so if you're not having reporters doing that, reporting on what's happening in your state, like how are you supposed to get that information?
Well, and that's the other thing too. And I'm really, really glad you brought that up. Local news essentially doesn't exist in a lot of places anymore. So my hometown, I'm from a really, really rural county. There's a little county paper. It's where I started my career at 15 years old with a really embarrassing column. We won't get into that. But the point is that newspaper exists, but it's run by like one person. And it's all, just like submitted photos of, Billy shot his first buck this weekend, or like Myrtle Rose's 90th birthday is coming up, and those are like community things and they're valid. I'm not saying that shouldn't be in the newspaper. What I'm saying is that should be in the newspaper alongside bigger community news, alongside questions about what the city council is doing and what's happening in the county and like how public funds are being used, and that just does not exist. And the paper, the more metropolitan paper in the county next over is going through the same thing. And now it's also down to one person. And it's just like one person can't produce news and edit and publish and investigate and write about these broader issues. So, and I think the other thing that bothers me about this dynamic too is that we know from research that pregnant people in rural counties are the ones who are suffering the most, right? Like they already didn't have great access to OBGYN care. They already didn't have great access to healthcare more broadly. So they're the ones suffering. We're not hearing all of those stories because there is no news presence in those areas, because those people are so shut off from the rest of the world. So I think that we don't have a good idea of exactly how much harm has been done, because those stories just aren't being documented. They're not being reported. They're not being told.
And I would just add this to like other melange in that area of like, I absolutely understand what Becca was doing. We've had this conversation before. I'm from a rural area of Wisconsin. So I
Small
get
town
the
girls.
yes, I get the like paper issue. My mom has been dealing with that. And then add on top of that, no broadband internet, right? Like
Yep.
my mom does not have broadband internet. It is a little better right now than it has been in the past, but like it's still not amazing. And then the local papers aren't particularly great. So they used to get the Wisconsin State Journal out of Madison, but because of cutbacks, they are not delivering it anymore. They can get it mailed. So that means written paper that was already, oldish news by the time you got it is another day delayed because they're mailing it instead of taking it out for delivery that morning. So like they canceled the subscription because like what's the point of getting 2-day old news? So I mean you're just seeing it in multiple like cascading effects. And so like my mom obviously has subscriptions to other like digital ones, but it's not the same.
Yeah, 100%. And I think so many of these communities, because they've lost their news source, they're relying on Facebook, which then ties back to the problem we were talking about with the algorithm that filters what they see. It's just, we're in this massive information crisis right now, I think, where, people who need information aren't getting it, or they're getting disinformation. And there's no way to combat that with the infrastructure that we have right now. And that's another thing that I really wish more people were talking about, it, specifically within the context of what's happened to access to reproductive health care.
And I think this is a conversation I've had on other episodes of like the anti-rights people are putting out so much disinformation and are so good at coordinating it between the multiple forms of anti-rights, whether that's anti-trans, anti-abortion, anti-LGBTQ, any number, anti-gender in general. They're so good at having similar, simple disinformation points that they kind of overwhelm. Like it's like playing whack-a-mole, but there are so many that you can't keep up with trying to get all that disinformation countered.
100%. I mean, think about anti-abortion billboards, for example. So those billboards are all over the rural South. I mean, they're all over the South in general, but particularly in the rural South. And it's disinformation. It's a photo of an infant and it says something like, at 6 weeks, I have a heartbeat. No, you go and talk to people in these communities, which I do regularly because that's where I'm from, and they don't know that that's not true. They have no way of knowing that that billboard isn't legitimate information. So they're driving around town, they're seeing all of these facts that are incorrect about abortion, but that's all they have to go on. And I think that's really, really damaging. But you're right in that, like, the anti-abortion movement and the right in general has been really good at disseminating disinformation and spreading it to the masses.
And a lot of money behind it.
So much money.
Okay, so this is all like such a bummer.
Yes, it's sad.
Let's talk about what's giving you hope. What is giving you hope right now? Because there are things that are giving me hope, or that I'm excited about. So let's start with you. What is giving you hope right now?
When I tell you the power in these like grassroots abortion funds, again, mostly in the South because I'm from here and I'm obsessed with it. I'm so sorry. It's just kind of who I am. But y'all, like, the organizing that's happening here and the ways that abortion fund workers are just determined to do whatever they can to help people and meet people where they're at, even in the face of such horrific circumstances and in the face of the fact that patients and clients need more money now than ever because they're having to travel further to get care, and that means more time off work, and that means more childcare, and I know y'all have talked about on the podcast before about how those expenses really pile up. I just think that the funds have been doing really incredible work, and that's why I have been doing the series and the newsletter spotlighting them, because I don't think it's well known the barriers that these funds are having to overcome, and I'm so inspired by them every day. I had a conversation yesterday with Oryaku Njoku, who was at ARC Southeast and now is over a national network of abortion funds. They're fantastic. And they were talking about all of the joy that they find in their work in organizing and in dreaming about the future of reproductive health care. And it just lightened my heart a little bit. I feel so lucky that I get to have those conversations, and I hope that when people hear those conversations or read them, they get to feel the same way. But yeah, I mean, just like the people who are really fighting back in this keep me going. And also like the young people. And when I'm talking young people, I'm talking like high school, college age. These kids are so mobilized, and there's so much, I don't know if I want to say smarter, but like better informed, I think, than I was at their age, and more politically engaged. And that also has been, such a big deal to me. I did a talk at Jackson State Community College, which is a school near where I grew up. And, it's mostly like lower income students. And God, it was like the best thing that's ever happened to me, just like getting to be in that classroom and talk to those kids. So, I think sometimes there's this rhetoric of like, oh, like the younger folks take everything for granted because they were born into Roe and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, like that's not what I am experiencing. I mean, nothing is ever simple truth. People contain multitudes, but I have really been seeing younger folks get super politically engaged and be dedicated to understanding the issues and getting the information and educating themselves. And that is it just makes my cold, dead heart beat a little bit. It's nice.
Yes, and to all of that, like, absolutely agree with all of those points. I will add in, We Testify and getting storytellers out there telling their stories of abortion access to show the full range of stories, the range of people and why they get them. And such important work to break down the stigma one story at a time. And the work that We Testify and Renee Bracey Sherman are doing is just amazing. And then the second thing I will say just happened. Julie Rickleman getting confirmed
Yes, I saw
to the
that.
First Circuit, lifetime appointment. Former attorney with the Center for Reproductive Rights, argued abortion rights in front of the Supreme Court. Actually had her on the podcast back then. Like, she is amazing. And now she is on the U.S. First Circuit. Like, that is giving me hope and excitement.
1,000%. Julie, we are cheering you on, girl. And I also want to go back to what you just said about We Testify. Renee Bracey Sherman has been building power and building community in such incredible ways for so long. But over the past year, what she has done with We Testify is nothing short of completely incredible. I mean, she has grown that organization. She has gone before Congress. I think they just had like a retreat that was like summer camp themed.
So
And she's so dedicated to this fight and so dedicated to showing that abortion stories are not cookie cutter and that people live these complicated, nuanced lives. And I so appreciate her and the work that she's doing.
and to her storytellers and making sure that they're
1,000%.
supported and like feeling love and just amazing.
It's the best.
Okay. So let's wrap up with, I always love to end with what can the audience do? So we're coming on the 1 year anniversary, or it just happened actually when you're hearing this. So what can our audience do for their own commemoration or fighting back?
I really want to challenge folks who are in this fight, who understand the harm that's being done in people's lives, to set up recurring donations with your local abortion funds. I'm always going to say, prioritize BIPOC-led abortion funds, and, funds that are led by low-income and queer folks. That's not to say that like the larger legacy organizations aren't important, but, I think those grassroots organizations are really where it's at right now. And they're so well positioned to be providing mutual aid in ways that are also safe in the current situation. So, and I think the importance of setting up a recurring donation is then, you're giving no matter what, right? You're giving through the times of feast and the times of famine. And it's just a more consistent practice. And I think it goes a little bit further. Would also encourage supporting organizations like We Testify, who are doing all kinds of amazing work to erase abortion stigma and to really educate people about reproductive health care.
I think the one thing I would add, just because it's timely, is it is appropriation season in Congress. So that means they are going to be marking up bills to fund the federal government. It is important that your congresspeople know that abortion rights, family planning are important to you, both globally and domestically, and that you do not support abortion bans in any way. So that means getting rid of Hyde and Helms. And to make sure that they know that their constituency, that is what you want, right? That you want to make sure that Title X is funded, that you want to make sure international family planning is funded, that you want to make sure sex education is funded. You want to make sure there's no Hyde, there's no Helms, that we're funding the United Nations Population Fund. So reaching out to your congressperson and saying and letting them know that's important to you right now is a great time to do it. All of those are important at all times, but like right now in particular, and like especially from like the global side, is the side that gets left out a lot, and not very many people write about it. So like your voice, like hearing from a couple people about like why international family planning is important, could actually make a huge difference in a way that some of the other things can't. But like still ask for all of it.
1,000%. Everything you just said, co-sign.
And it's going to be an ugly fight. And there's like huge budget cuts that they're proposing this year. So like it's really important to make your voice heard around these things at this moment.
Yeah.
Becca, thank you for ending on a positive note. It was nice to end with hope.
Anytime.
And like what are things we are looking forward to. So thank you for doing this again.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, y'all, I hope you enjoyed my interview with Becca. I really am glad we ended on good news and things that are giving us hope, because there is so much giving us hope, even in these really dark times. So, yeah, hold on to what is giving you hope for this very long fight ahead. And with that, I will see y'all in 2 weeks. If you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like us to cover, always feel free to shoot me an email. You can reach me at Jennie, Jennie, at rePROsFightBack.com, or you can find us on social media. We're at rePROs Fight Back on Facebook and Twitter, or rePROs FB on Instagram. If you love our podcast and want to make sure more people find it, take the time to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Or if you want to make sure to support the podcast, you can also donate on our website at rePROsFightBack.com. Thanks all.